Hey, I'd like to point you in the direction that Pearl Harbor bombing, so dated December the 7th, 1941, was all a fraud. I'd like to show you this video, but I'm a little bit afraid to show it to you because it appears it is definitely copyrighted. So I'm just simply going to point you in the direction so that you can watch the video yourself on YouTube. The title of the video is Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, Architect of Pearl Harbor Bombing, in parentheses, Merv Griffin Show. The channel is the Merv Griffin Show with the two words Griffin and Show combined. Originally this was broadcast on September the 2nd, 1965, and it's a very, very comical thing. Like I say, I don't want to play it for you because I think if I played it, my channel would get a copyright strike, and I'm not sure of all the implications of getting strikes. I'm rather new to making videos on YouTube, so I'm going to try to protect my channel for right now. However, you can go to this video on YouTube. Trust me, it's worth it. Trust me, it's a laugh. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it while we look at some pictures of Mitsuo Fuchida. And that's what the interview looks like right there. You will see it on your screen. If you go to that Mike Douglas site. So what I'm going to do is take you away from where I hope you will go and watch it. I think it's about 20 minutes, but it's actually very hilarious, and I mean hilarious. And I'm not kidding you. It is actually extremely funny. Now, why is it so funny? Well, one reason is that this gentleman here, Mitsuo Fuchida, Mike Douglas will say he doesn't speak English. And they brought with him an interpreter. And so he's very adamant, Mike Douglas is very adamant that Mitsuo Fuchida does not speak English. And the next thing you know, as soon as Mike Douglas asks the first question, he responds in a monotone English, and the interpreter sits there almost entirely throughout the 20-minute interview and barely says two sentences. But yet Mike Douglas will say he doesn't speak English. Well, it's actually very funny. And then another point in the interview, he will ask him about when did you know that the war was being lost? And there he is with Billy Graham, because he's going to have a conversion after the war, and that's going to help to sell the story, because Billy Graham will pick up on it and say, here's the captain of the Japanese Navy force that led the bombing on Pearl Harbor. He's turned his life over to the Lord. Now, I'm a believer in Jesus. I've loved Jesus for many, many years, and I believe this with all my heart. I was very fascinated by it because I actually met an individual who was in World War II, and he told me of Jake DeSazier. Now, Jake DeSazier is a man who supposedly was on the Jimmy Doolittle bombing, and he got shot down over Japan and was held captive. And then after the war, DeSazier went back and became missionary in Japan. And because DeSazier was in Japan, being a missionary, passing out tracts and witnessing for the gospel, that's how Captain Mitsuo Fuchida became a Christian. Now, you have to, there he is with Billy Graham again, you have to realize that the level of deception is so high and so good that it's a pretty complicated web of deception, in that, first of all, the Pearl Harbor bombing is a deception. Secondly, the Jimmy Doolittle story is a deception, with Jake DeShazier bailing out and being held captive in Japan, and then getting converted during his captivity in war years in Japan, and then deciding to come back to Japan to preach the gospel. And when DeShazier came back, that is when the captain who led the bombing raid on Pearl Harbor was converted. So it's like 2, 3, 4 stories of deception, all intertwined in a web, like a spider's web. So it's a spider's web out there, and it is so hard to unravel some of this stuff. You have to be really clued into codes. You have to be really clued into key words. You have to be really clued into the fact that, oh yes, you could have been deceived. There he is with the Baal earth, the Baal, Baal, the devil. Okay, we live on a plane, not a globe, not a circle, not a ball. It is just a flat plane, period. Now, keep in mind, all these things are webbed together. And you and I go out of our door, or even in our home, and we wake up in the morning and there's a web. And I'm not talking about World Wide Web, but that's interesting that it is called the World Wide Web. And you get stuck in the web, like a fly stuck in a spider's web. So you've got to go to that site. At one point in the interview, Mike Douglas will ask him, "When did you think you were losing the war?" And he said, "Guadalcanal." And then Mike Douglas tries to correct him and say, "You know what? That was really early in the war. That couldn't have been true." So then he mumbles something, and I don't know what he mumbles. If you listen to it, maybe you can put down in the bottom what the captain who bombed Pearl Harbor mumbles. He tries to make a comeback real quick, because it's obviously nobody really knows their scripts too well. And again, the man who's supposed to be the interpreter in this whole thing is just sitting there quietly for almost 20 minutes. He does get in maybe 2 sentences. But remember, Mike Douglas said he doesn't speak English, meaning Captain Mitsuo Fuchida. He doesn't speak English. And then throughout the whole interview, broadcast on television, the man had a mumble-type English. It all appeared to be completely fake to me, and that he didn't really seem that he had any real experience with the Japanese language. I'm not a linguist, but I will tell you something. I don't think the man speaks a word of Japanese. And that whole thing was just so funny. Now, I don't show the video because I'm afraid that I will get a copyright strike, and I don't want to do that right now. So I'm trying to direct your attention to it, and I'm going to put the sign up again so you can maybe find it yourself. Okay, there it is. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, architect of Pearl Harbor bombing, Merv Griffin's show, broadcast on TV September the 2nd, 1965. So this is kind of like a commentary on that particular video, so that you can go there and take a look at it. And then there's another funny thing. There's another guest that comes on about halfway through the interview, and I think he was supposed to be from the FBI, and he says, "Oh yeah, we were supposed to know all about this," and and everything like that. And it's like, oh, here's our two enemies, and now we're friends and buddies, even though, quote, they bombed the heck out of Pearl Harbor, and now we're friends and buddies, and it's all a joke. And I'll tell you another reason why it's a joke. In the middle of the interview, all right, he starts talking about over in Japan, the Army and the Navy were fighting each other. And everybody laughs because it's such bull crap. It's BS of the highest order with a capital B and a capital S. He says the Army and the Navy in Japan were over there fighting. While all this is going on, they're planning to bomb Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese and the Navy are fighting each other. And it's so hilarious. It's almost like as if the man is high on drugs or something during the interview. Like, what will he say next? Maybe he was a young actor and he didn't have much training in front of cameras, because obviously when Mike Douglas said, Mr. Fuchida doesn't speak a word of English. And then he began to proceed to answer every single question. So there you have it. Mitsuo Fuchida. And he's the man of the hour. And you've got to go to that interview and tune it in and watch it. And some of his literature and stuff can probably still be found, because supposedly he came to U.S. and became an evangelist, and he had a big story because he led the bombing on Pearl Harbor, but he really didn't hate Americans, and now he's converted, and so people began to believe all that. And he had a map. And this map that is said, it sold for almost like $250,000 later in history. This map of him planning the bombing of Pearl Harbor. His artifacts are so sacred. Well, if it really did happen, nobody should be selling a map of a man who bombed and killed people, supposedly. Why would you sell their map? Why is it a sacred document? Come on, get with it, folks. I mean, it's hokey pokey nonsense. But you know what? If you're listening to me for the first time, it may be hard for you, because you're going to have what's called cognitive dissonance. And that cognitive dissonance means in your mind, you can't allow something in that's different. It's just a little too much for you to handle. And I remember when I first started getting, quote, suspicious of many, many things, that cognitive dissonance hung over me tremendously. And I could hardly shake it off. And I thought, either all these folks like me talking to you now are nuts completely and belong in a psychiatric ward, or you have been lied to. And you have been lied to in the highest order of things. In fact, the lies are so big and so enormous that if anybody tries to pull you out of it, it's all, I won't say it's impossible, because there's many of us out here that have been pulled out of the hoax lie system. And again, a word goes out to Dave Johnson, also known as Dave J. He was the one that helped to bring me out of this hoax system. And I'm very, very thankful for that. So I don't know, if I can get one or two out of the hoax system, I'll be really happy. And don't believe Captain Mitsuo Fuchida. Now here's his track. This is the DeSazier track. See, Jake DeSazier in the upper right-hand corner there. He's the one that was on the Jimmy Doolittle bombing, got shot down, became a prisoner in Japan, and then after his imprisonment, after the war, he went back to Japan, and he wrote a book, I believe, and he did some evangelistic work. There's a little description and everything for the interview itself. that I want you to go to. Now, the title of my channel is War Backwards is Raw. And notice the sun god images here and the plane coming out of the sun right to your eye, and then right from your eye into your mind. Okay, there's one more shot there of Captain Fuchida, who was the so-called architect of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Even the title of that video might alert you to something, because the word architect comes out of the Masonic lodges, that their God, they believe in, is the architect of the creation of the world. Now, just a little footnote on that. The true maker of the world was not an architect. The true maker of all that you see was a creator, not an architect. An architect does drawings, but a creator makes it. And God made this world out of nothing in Genesis 1. So he was not necessarily an architect. He was creator. And the title of the video, Architect of Pearl Harbor Bombing, you can find it at the site called The Merv Griffin Show. And you will get some laughs out of it. And I wish that I could have shown it to you, but I was a little bit afraid that it would be picked up by the copyright police, and I would probably get a strike, because there's big warnings all over it about the owners who bought the copyrights to that particular video and that particular interview. So go to that site, look it over, and then please come back to my site and drop a comment in my site that you went there and you watched it and you got some laughs. So laugh, laugh, laugh. It was nonsense. It was a lie. It was a lie. The history we've been taught has been history of lies. And they know it. And when you watch that interview, you'll see they really know it's all a bunch of bunk. But they can't get it out to you that it's all bunk, and you'll see it on their faces, and they can hardly present the deception in a good way because it's such bunk and so many lies. So thank you for watching. I appreciate your support. Sometimes I mumble and ramble, but you know what? I want to get some videos out there right now in times of crisis to show you that the deceptions are huge. They are so huge that anybody who watches my channel or other good channels would probably not want to believe us, because everywhere around you the deception is so huge and so big. But I would like to say this. David got some pebbles out of a brook, and he fired one and struck down Goliath, and he used Goliath's own sword to cut his head off. So we'll try to use some of these videos to cut the head off of Goliath. End of video.